For 7 months, a millionaire paid his secretary to be his wife and never expected this ending. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. Ethan Caldwell stands alone at the floor-to-ceiling window of his Manhattan office, 48 stories above Fifth Avenue. Watching traffic crawl like veins of light through the city he built his empire in. A man whose name moves markets yet cannot quiet the pressure tightening in his chest as tomorrow's board vote looms. A vote that will decide whether he keeps control of the company his father started in a rented garage 3 decades ago. Because the shareholders want stability, tradition, and above all an image that says Ethan Caldwell is settled, predictable, married, and safe. Not the headline-making workaholic bachelor the financial press loves to speculate about. And that is how the idea forms. Not romantic, not sentimental, but clean and contractual, like everything else in his life. Claire Monroe is already at her desk when he turns around, headset resting around her neck, fingers moving with calm precision over the keyboard. The same calm she brings every time a crisis explodes on Ethan's calendar. The same calm that hides the fact that her rent is overdue. Her mother's medical bills are stacking up, and the raise she was promised keeps getting postponed. Because Claire does not complain, she solves problems. And that is exactly why Ethan chose her as his executive secretary 2 years ago, because she is efficient, discreet, and invisible in a room full of powerful men, until he speaks her name and asks her to step inside his office and close the door. He does not waste time, does not soften the edges, because Ethan Caldwell never has. And he slides a slim folder across the polished desk, the paper inside heavier than it looks, outlining a 7-month arrangement with dates, appearances, compensation, and one clear condition printed in bold near the bottom: no emotional involvement. This is a professional agreement, nothing more. Claire reads every word, once, twice, her heartbeat loud in her ears as the meaning settles. A paid marriage, a role she never imagined herself playing. Especially not for the man who signs her paychecks and barely looks at her unless something is on fire, and she wants to laugh at the absurdity of it, to ask if this is some kind of test, but Ethan's face is steady, controlled, as if he is negotiating a merger instead of offering to pay a woman to be his wife. He explains it like a presentation: 7 months to get through the board transition, public appearances only, separate private lives, a monthly payment that would erase her debts, and then some, health insurance included. Everything clean, legal, discreet, and when he finishes, he adds one line that feels almost rehearsed. Think of it as a job. Claire, nothing more. Silence stretches, filled only by the hum of the city outside. And Claire thinks of the eviction notice folded in her bag, the voicemail from the hospital billing office, the way she has always done the right thing and still ended up one missed paycheck from losing everything. And she realizes this is not a fantasy or a fairy tale. It is a transaction, one that asks her to trade comfort for control, dignity for security. And as she lifts her eyes to meet Ethan's, she understands something else. Just as clearly, that whatever this is, it will change them both, whether they intend it to or not. Claire Monroe does not sign the contract that day. She carries it home in her bag like something fragile and dangerous, riding the subway back to her small walk-up apartment in Queens while the city blurs past the windows. Thinking about how strange it feels that one conversation in a glass tower can follow you all the way down into a cramped kitchen with flickering lights and a refrigerator that hums too loudly at night. She sets the folder on the table beside a stack of unopened mail and makes herself instant soup she barely tastes, her mind replaying Ethan's calm voice, the way he never raised it, never begged, never tried to charm her, because to him this was not personal, it was strategy. Claire opens the mail slowly, an overdue rent notice stamped in red, a hospital bill with her mother's name printed neatly at the top, numbers adding up to more than she makes in months, and a reminder that her insurance deductible resets soon, which means more out-of-pocket costs she does not have. She sits on the edge of the couch and presses her palms together, trying to breathe through the familiar tightness in her chest, the quiet panic she never lets show at work. because Claire has learned that looking composed is sometimes the only armor you have. Across the city, Ethan Caldwell is still awake in his office, jacket draped over the back of his chair, tie loosened, staring at the same skyline from a different angle, replaying the board meeting from earlier that day. The subtle questions disguised as jokes, the glances exchanged when someone mentioned legacy and optics, and the unspoken message that a man who cannot manage his personal life might not be trusted with billions in assets. He pours himself a glass of water and does not drink it, thinking about his father, who believed stability was not about happiness but about perception, about giving people nothing they could use against you. And Ethan knows he has played this game well for years, except for the one part he ignored, the way the world watches a man like him and waits for cracks. The contract was supposed to be simple, a solution that would quiet the noise, but as the night stretches on, Ethan finds himself wondering why he offered it to Claire specifically, when he could have hired an actress, a consultant, anyone detached, and the answer unsettles him because it is not entirely logical. It is trust, built quietly over hundreds of small moments where Claire handled crises without drama and kept his secrets without being asked. The next morning, Claire visits her mother before work, sitting beside the hospital bed, brushing hair back from a tired face, listening to doctors explain treatment plans in careful tones, nodding as if she understands everything, promising she will take care of it, because that is what she always says, even when she has no idea how. Her mother squeezes her hand and tells her not to worry so much, that things have a way of working out, and Claire smiles, thinking about how hope can be both comforting and cruel. When she arrives at the office, Ethan is already in a meeting, his door closed, voices low inside, and Claire moves through her morning routine on autopilot, scheduling calls, answering emails, maintaining the smooth surface that keeps the company running, while the contract rests in her drawer like a question she cannot escape. By late afternoon, she is summoned again, and this time Ethan does not slide the folder across the desk. He simply asks if she has read it, and when she says yes, he nods once, explaining again why he needs this arrangement, how much is at stake, how temporary it will be, his words measured, almost careful, as if he knows this is not just another deal. Claire looks at him then, really looks, and sees not just the billionaire executive, but a man cornered by expectations, and she realizes something that shifts the weight of the decision, that saying yes would not just save her from drowning, it would also make her responsible for holding up someone else's carefully constructed world. She asks for time, and Ethan gives it without argument, because beneath the confidence, he understands that whatever happens next, there is no turning back. Claire returns to Ethan's office 2 days later with the signed contract in her hands, the edges slightly creased as if it has been folded and unfolded too many times, and when she places it on his desk her voice is steady even though her pulse is not, telling him she agrees to the terms, all of them, because she understands this is a professional arrangement and because she needs the money, and Ethan listens without interruption, nodding once as if sealing a deal he has already priced out in his head. Yet something flickers behind his eyes when he realizes she did not negotiate, did not ask for more time, did not soften the moment with emotion. They go through the document together line by line, confirming details like schedules, public appearances, living arrangements, and expectations, and Claire notices how carefully everything is worded, how even the language avoids anything that sounds like intimacy, replacing it with neutral phrases like obligations and appearances and mutual benefit. When Ethan explains the clause about separate bedrooms and private lives, Claire agrees quickly, relieved by the distance it promises, because pretending to be someone's wife in public feels manageable compared to the idea of blurring lines she has spent her entire adult life protecting. He hands her a pen and waits as she signs again, officially this time, the scratch of ink sounding louder than it should in the quiet room, and when she is done, Ethan signs his name with practiced ease, sliding the contract into a secure folder as if locking away a future version of himself. The next steps begin immediately, because Ethan Caldwell does not delay execution once a decision is made, and within hours Claire is meeting with a legal advisor, a stylist, and a communications consultant, each explaining their role in shaping her into Mrs. Caldwell for the next 7 months, while Ethan remains mostly silent, observing, approving, making small adjustments that reveal how closely he watches everything. Claire learns she will move into his townhouse near Central Park, not because he expects closeness, but because proximity simplifies logistics, and she reminds herself that convenience is not affection, even as she imagines what it will be like to sleep under the same roof as her employer. That evening, Ethan gives her a brief tour of the house, pointing out guest rooms, security systems, and shared spaces with the same tone he might use to explain a new office layout. And Claire is struck by how little of him seems to live here, how the rooms are immaculate but impersonal, like a place designed to impress rather than comfort. They stop in the kitchen, and Ethan mentions in passing that staff will assume she is his wife starting tomorrow. That consistency is important, and Claire nods, practicing the weight of that word in her mind, wife, knowing it will soon belong to her in name, if not in truth. Before they part for the night, Ethan reiterates the most important rule: no emotional involvement, no matter what situations arise, because clarity protects them both, and Claire agrees, telling herself that feelings are a luxury she cannot afford anyway. As she closes the door to the guest room that will be hers, contract safely tucked into her bag like a reminder of what this is and is not, Claire understands that she has stepped into a role that will demand more than acting, more than discipline, because for 7 months she will be seen, judged, and believed as someone she is not, and the only way to survive it is to remember why she said yes in the first place. The first month moves faster than Claire expects, because once the image is set in motion there is no pause button, only appearances stacked on appearances, mornings that begin with curated outfits laid out by a stylist, and evenings that end with polite smiles held a second too long for photographers. And Claire learns quickly that being Ethan Caldwell's wife is less about affection and more about endurance. She memorizes details the way she memorized schedules as a secretary, the names of board members' spouses, the charities Ethan publicly supports, the way he takes his coffee, black in the morning and untouched in the afternoon, and she delivers each detail on cue, answering questions with practiced warmth that feels almost natural after a while. At galas she stands beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm when cameras appear, laughing at comments she barely hears, and Ethan notices how easily she reads a room, how she redirects conversations away from sensitive topics without drawing attention, how she never oversteps yet somehow makes everyone comfortable, and he realizes she is doing far more than the contract requires. Inside the townhouse, they move like careful strangers sharing a space, coordinating schedules on the kitchen counter, exchanging brief updates about the day, never lingering too long in the same room, because the rules are clear and both intend to follow them. Claire decorates her guest room with small touches from her old apartment, a framed photograph of her mother, a worn paperback on the nightstand, reminders of who she was before this role, while Ethan keeps his spaces exactly as they were, minimalist and untouched, as if resisting any sign that this arrangement could leave a mark. Publicly, the story works, headlines soften, the board relaxes, and investors respond well to the image of a grounded CEO with a supportive wife, and Ethan watches the numbers stabilize with a sense of relief he does not fully acknowledge. Privately, small moments slip through the cracks, like the night Claire fixes a loose button on his jacket without thinking, or the morning Ethan leaves a note about a schedule change instead of sending an email. Gestures so minor they almost escape notice, yet they linger longer than they should. Claire becomes aware of how often Ethan looks to her before answering a question in public, trusting her instincts, and how naturally. He includes her in conversations that used to exclude everyone else, and she reminds herself that this is exactly what she is being paid to do. The montage of their fake marriage continues: charity dinners, family brunches with Ethan's distant relatives, interviews where Claire speaks about partnership and support in general terms, careful never to lie outright, yet never revealing the truth, and each successful appearance reinforces the illusion. By the end of the second month, Claire realizes she no longer has to think before smiling beside Ethan, and that realization unsettles her more than the attention ever did, because it means the role is no longer just a role. Ethan notices it too, the ease, the way silence between them feels less awkward and more expected, and he tells himself it is efficiency, nothing more, because the contract is clear, the timeline is fixed, and emotions have no place here, even as the line between performance and reality grows thinner with every passing day. The real test arrives without warning at a black tie charity fundraiser held at a historic hotel downtown, an event meant to showcase Ethan's leadership to donors and board members alike. And Claire senses the tension the moment they step out of the car and cameras flash brighter than usual, questions sharper, smiles thinner. Inside the ballroom, crystal lights reflect off polished floors, and Claire slips effortlessly into her role, greeting familiar faces, guiding conversations, anchoring Ethan when he pauses too long on a question. But midway through the evening, a senior board member corners them with a remark disguised as concern, suggesting that Ethan's recent decisions have been influenced by personal distractions, that perhaps marriage has softened his edge. The room seems to quiet around them, and Claire feels Ethan's posture stiffen, his instinct to deflect with data already forming. But before he can respond, she speaks, calm and clear, saying that partnership has not changed his focus, it has strengthened it, that she has watched him work longer hours, listen more carefully, and carry responsibility with a steadiness that comes from knowing he is supported, not compromised. The words are not in the script they practiced, yet they land with unexpected authority, drawing nods from people who had been skeptical moments earlier. The board member smiles tightly and retreats, and Ethan turns to Claire with a look that is part surprise, part relief. Because she did not have to step in, the contract did not require it, and yet she did, without hesitation. The rest of the evening shifts subtly, conversations warmer, questions less aggressive, and by the time dessert is served, the narrative has changed, not because of a press release or a statistic, but because Claire held her ground in a room that thrives on doubt. On the drive home, the city lights streak past the windows, and the silence between them feels different, heavier, until Ethan finally thanks her, not as an employer acknowledging a job well done, but as a man recognizing something personal he did not expect. Claire brushes it off, saying it was nothing, that she simply told the truth, and the word truth hangs between them, unsettling in its simplicity. Back at the townhouse, they pause in the entryway, the night still echoing in their minds, and for a moment neither moves, because something has shifted, a line crossed not by touch or confession, but by choice. Ethan returns to his office later, reviewing emails that praise his performance, his stability, his image, and he realizes the success feels different this time, less hollow, because someone stood beside him when it mattered without being asked. Claire retreats to her room, heart racing, replaying the moment she spoke up, wondering why it felt so natural, so necessary, when she has spent months reminding herself this is temporary. Both of them lie awake that night, aware that the rules remain unchanged on paper, yet something essential has been tested in public and held firm, and neither can pretend they did not feel it. The days after the fundraiser unfold more quietly, as if both Ethan and Claire are careful not to disturb whatever settled between them that night, and the townhouse feels less like a shared address and more like a place where routines gently overlap. Ethan starts coming home earlier when his schedule allows, not announcing it, simply appearing in the kitchen while Claire is making tea, exchanging updates about the day that drift from logistics into observations, small things that would never have made it into a calendar invite. One evening, a late meeting leaves Ethan visibly exhausted, his shoulders tense, his voice shorter than usual, and Claire notices without being told, setting a mug in front of him and suggesting he sit for a moment. Instead of returning immediately to his laptop, he does, surprising himself by listening. And as they sit at opposite ends of the table, the silence feels less like avoidance and more like rest. Claire talks about her mother's upcoming appointment, about the anxiety she tries to hide because worrying feels unproductive, and Ethan listens in a way few people ever have, without interrupting, without offering solutions, simply present, and when she stops, he thanks her for telling him, as if the act itself mattered. Later that week, Ethan catches a cold, nothing serious, but enough to slow him down. And when Claire notices he has skipped dinner, she knocks on his office door and asks if he is all right, her concern instinctive rather than contractual. She leaves soup outside his door like a quiet truce, and Ethan smiles at the simplicity of it, realizing no one has done something like that for him in years. They do not talk about the contract during these moments, do not reference the rules that still exist between them, but both are acutely aware of them, the way you are aware of a line drawn on the ground even when you are not looking directly at it. One night, After reviewing documents together in the living room, they linger longer than planned, the city humming softly beyond the windows, and Ethan mentions that he has not slept well since his father passed, that the responsibility never truly leaves him, and the admission feels heavier than anything he has said in public. Claire listens, offering no advice, only understanding, and he realizes that being heard without expectation is a rare relief. When they finally stand apart, the moment stretches, charged not with romance, but with recognition, two people acknowledging something unspoken and choosing not to name it. Claire retreats to her room, heart unsteady, reminding herself that comfort is not commitment, and that this closeness has an expiration date printed clearly on paper. Ethan returns to his office, staring at the contract locked in his drawer, aware for the first time that the rule about emotional distance feels less like protection and more like a warning. Neither crosses any line that night, yet both lie awake longer than usual, understanding that the most dangerous shifts do not announce themselves with grand gestures, but with quiet moments that feel real, and once that feeling takes hold, it does not disappear easily. By the beginning of the 6th month, the countdown becomes impossible to ignore, because the contract no longer feels like a safety net, but like a clock mounted on the wall, ticking louder with every passing day. And Claire notices it first in the way Ethan hesitates before mentioning future plans, conversation stopping just short of anything beyond the present. She marks the remaining weeks privately, not on a calendar but in moments. The last charity dinner she will attend as his wife, the last interview where her name will be spoken beside his, the last morning she will wake up in a house that has begun to feel familiar in ways she never expected. Ethan notices it too, though he does not say it out loud. The way he finds reasons to keep Claire close under the guise of efficiency, extending meetings, suggesting additional appearances, anything that stretches time without admitting why. One evening, after reviewing upcoming events, Ethan casually mentions the possibility of extending the arrangement, framing it as a practical decision, saying the board would appreciate continuity and that it would be easier for everyone involved. Claire looks up from the papers, surprised by how quickly the suggestion tightens her chest, and for the first time since this began, she does not respond immediately. She asks him what he really means by extension, whether it is another contract, another set of rules, another period of pretending, and Ethan answers carefully, saying it would be the same terms, just longer, because clarity has worked so far. The word clarity lands wrong, because Claire has spent months navigating feelings that were never meant to exist, and the idea of continuing without acknowledging them feels heavier than leaving. She tells him she cannot do that, that 7 months was the agreement, and she intends to honor it exactly as written, because staying longer would mean lying to herself in a way she is no longer willing to do. Ethan is taken aback, not by her refusal, but by the quiet certainty behind it, and he asks if she is unhappy, if he has crossed a line, if something is wrong. Claire shakes her head and tells him the opposite is true, that things have become too real, and that is precisely why she needs to leave when the time comes, because she does not want to be paid to care, to listen, to stand beside someone she has grown to respect. The conversation leaves both of them unsettled, and in the days that follow, an invisible distance creeps back into their routines, polite but strained, as if they are both bracing for an ending neither wants to name. Ethan throws himself into work, staying later than usual, reminding himself that control has always been his strength, while Claire quietly prepares, organizing her finances, planning a move, rehearsing the version of herself that will exist after this role ends. They still perform flawlessly in public, smiles intact, hands steady, but behind the scenes, every interaction carries the weight of what is coming. And when the final month approaches, the silence between them speaks louder than any argument could, because both understand that the most painful part of this arrangement is not that it was fake, but that somewhere along the way, it stopped feeling that way, and neither knows how to undo that without losing something essential. The final day arrives without ceremony, because endings rarely announce themselves, and the townhouse feels unusually quiet as Claire packs the last of her things, moving carefully through rooms that once felt temporary and now carry weight she did not anticipate. She leaves the guest room exactly as she found it, stripped of personal traces, the way it was always meant to be, and places the signed contract and the wedding ring on the kitchen counter, aligned neatly, symbols of an agreement fulfilled to the letter. When Ethan enters the room, he stops short at the sight of them, understanding immediately what this means, because there is no argument left to have, no clause to reinterpret. Claire meets his gaze and tells him she is grateful, that the arrangement gave her stability when she needed it most, and that she will never regret honoring it. But she cannot stay a moment longer pretending that what she feels can be measured in payments or extended by paperwork. Ethan tries to respond with logic, saying they can adjust terms, remove restrictions, find a structure that works, but Claire shakes her head gently, explaining that love cannot be revised like a contract, and that if he wants her to stay, it cannot be because he needs her image or her support. It must be because he chooses her without leverage. The words land harder than any confrontation could, because for the first time Ethan sees the situation clearly, that he used money to solve a problem that required vulnerability instead. Claire thanks him one last time, picks up her bag, and walks out the door without looking back, leaving behind a silence that feels final. Days pass, and Ethan moves through them on autopilot, attending meetings, answering questions, signing documents. Yet everything feels strangely hollow now that the performance is over. The board congratulates him on a successful transition, praising the stability he achieved, but the praise rings empty, because the cost has become impossible to ignore. One evening, alone in his office, Ethan opens the drawer where the contract once rested and realizes that for all his resources, there is one thing he cannot purchase: the willingness of someone to stay. The thought unsettles him, then clarifies something he has avoided for months. That control has always protected him from loss, but it has also kept him from connection. He leaves the office early that night, something he rarely does, and drives through the city without a destination, replaying moments he dismissed as efficiency, kindness he misread as professionalism, and he understands now that Claire gave him more than he ever paid for: honesty. The next morning, Ethan makes a decision that does not involve lawyers or advisors, and for the first time, he does not calculate the outcome. He goes to find Claire, not with an offer or a contract, but with the simple truth that he should have spoken sooner, that he does not want a wife for appearances or stability, but a partner who chooses him freely, and that if she walks away again, he will accept it, because that is what respect looks like. When he finally sees her, standing in a place that belongs entirely to her life beyond him, Ethan speaks without rehearsed lines, telling her that the only ending he never expected was realizing how empty his world was without her in it. And for the first time since this began, there is no script to follow, only a choice that must be made without guarantees. Claire does not answer Ethan immediately, because this time the decision is hers alone, and she knows the weight of it deserves honesty rather than impulse. So she listens as he speaks without defenses, without framing his words as strategy, admitting that he hid behind contracts because they made loss predictable, and that meeting her showed him how small that world was. She tells him she left because she needed to know whether he would come to her without an agreement in hand, whether he would be willing to risk rejection the way she had risked everything by walking away. And when Ethan says he understands, that whatever she chooses he will respect it, she sees the difference not in his words, but in his restraint. They talk for hours that day, about the months they shared, about the moments that felt real long before either admitted it, about fear and pride, and how easily money can replace courage if you let it. And by the time they part, nothing is resolved except one truth: that whatever comes next will not be purchased or performed. Weeks pass, and life settles into a quieter rhythm, Claire rebuilding her independence, Ethan redefining his priorities, yet they remain present in each other's lives, not out of obligation but choice, meeting for coffee, attending her mother's appointment together without cameras or expectations, learning who they are without roles to play. When Ethan asks Claire to marry him again, there is no ring prepared in advance, no speech written for effect, only a simple question asked in a place that matters to her, and she says yes not because the future is certain, but because the choice is free. The wedding is small, attended by people who know them as they are rather than who they appear to be, and there is no contract signed, no conditions listed, only a promise spoken plainly, to show up honestly and to choose each other every day. In the months that follow, the world adjusts, headlines fade, business stabilizes, but the real change is quieter, found in mornings shared without agendas and evenings spent talking instead of calculating outcomes. Ethan learns that leadership does not weaken when it makes room for connection, and Claire learns that partnership does not require sacrifice of self when it is built on respect. Looking back, neither of them measures those 7 months by what was gained or lost financially, but by the moment everything shifted, when pretending stopped being enough and truth became the only acceptable ending. What began as a transaction ends as a commitment neither of them could have negotiated, and in choosing each other without terms, they finally find the stability that no contract could ever guarantee.